Shall we start, sir?
Yes, madam.
Good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Purnima. Wishing you a very happy Doctor's Day to all of you today. And I'm here to present my presentation on secondary immunodeficiency due to steroids and diabetes. This was my ECMS presentation in the month of May 2020. I would like to talk about the function of steroids as well as their effects on immunosuppression as well as anti-inflammatory effect, and also how this is going to cause immunodeficiency in any individual. And also with respect to diabetes, I would like to touch upon points which cause immunodeficiency, the causes leading to immunodeficiency due to diabetes. This will be the way I am going to speak going forward. Secondary immunodeficiency, as we all know, is not due to the acquired defect, but it could be because of various causes. It can also be due to causes like long-term causes like HIV, AIDS, and also other disorders. But here in this presentation, I am going to talk about immunodeficiency due to long-term administration of steroids and so also immunodeficiency due to diabetes mellitus. This will be the normal inflammation and resolution pattern during any injury in an individual. The host inflammatory response is the primary defense mechanisms. What happens following an injury or infection is what is given here. We all know that during an acute phase of the inflammation, the innate immunity comes into fore. There is non-specific immune response, which is a rapid response, and this occurs during the acute inflammation. Over a period of time, the adaptive immune system comes in, which is more antigen specific, and the response takes a few days, and this is how the chronic inflammation goes on, following up to healing. Now, what is this normal inflammatory response? This is important to know the normal response if we have to talk about where the steroids or where this is inhibited during the progression of diabetes. So the normal inflammatory response goes on like this. Wherever there is a site of injury, the primary inflammation is mediated by mast cells and macrophages, which release the pro-inflammatory mediators like bioactive amines, cytokines, like TNF alpha and also interleukin 1s and lipid mediators. What will happen physiologically is there will be increased capillary permeability leading to vasodilatation and also WCM to the injured site. All this will happen simultaneously, leading to the hallmarks of inflammation, which we see whenever there is an inflammation, like the pain, heat, redness, and also swelling. Only when we are aware of this fact, we can make out where the mechanisms are interrupted when we give them the steroids. So this is the actual process of normal inflammatory response. And then what will happen? These active species are attracted to the inflammatory site. Then the monocytes which are within the blood vessels, they emigrate from the blood vessels, move out and mature into the macrophages. And then at the inflammatory site, the neutrophils undergo constitutive apoptosis, which also helps in the removal of the toxic contents. That is the histotoxic contents by the macrophages. So this whole process of inflammation will cause the removal of toxins and also lead to the hallmark of inflammation. Now let us come to the steroid system, that is the steroids which cause the immunodeficiency. As already mentioned, this is a secondary immunodeficiency, and then we'll go about how the steroid causes immunodeficiency. This slide is not very clear. I would like to just tell you about this. This just implies that the steroids has both anti-inflammatory as well as immunosuppressive effect. what are the anti-inflammatory effect and also what are the immunosuppressive effect. Then there is the gray area wherein there is an overlap of the both the actions. So the one on the left is the anti-inflammatory effect. I will just read out because the slide is not very clear. The first one here, what we see is the leukocyte accumulation. Wherever there is an injury, there is a leukocyte accumulation. This is one of the anti-inflammatory effects. And then it reduces the leukocyte function, and also there will be monocytopenia as well as eosinopenia. And then there are also reduced complement components, and also there is reduced histamine mediated reactions. We all know that histamine is the one which causes the inflammatory effects. Then coming to the right hand side, that is the red circle, which has the immunosuppressive effects. This is because we all know that steroids, as much as they are useful for acute inflammatory, it's like a double-edged sword. It can also have the anti-immunosuppressive effects. So whatever you give has to be a very, very balanced calculation, because on one hand, it causes nice anti-inflammatory effect, but on the other hand, this can also cause the suppression of the immune system, leading to counterproductive effect on the infection. So when we talk about immunosuppressive effects, there will be reduced lymphocyte and also monocyte function. Since the is not very clear, the first one that is seen is what I'm trying to do, and will be lymphocytopenia, and also basically because the whole, am I audible? Because it says unstable internet connection.
Yeah, in between you were not, but now you are.
So this is like, okay, this is a double-edged sword wherein it has both anti-inflammatory as well as immunosuppressive effects. Anti not good for the system. So we'll be talking about glucocorticoids because that is taken as a prototype here. What are the primary effects of glucocorticoids? These are all the anti-inflammatory effect, basically for what it is regularly used for. In case of anti-inflammatory effect, it acts in two mechanisms. It acts by two mechanisms. One is trans-repression and also another one is trans-activation. What is trans-activation? The inhibition of inflammation by inducing anti-inflammatory mediator is called trans-activation, whereas by blocking the activity of inflammatory mediators is the trans-repression. So whenever they block the action of inflammatory mediators, that is trans-repression, and also when they inhibit when they induce the anti-inflammatory mediators, that's the activation. Now coming to the immunosuppressive effects, it suppresses delayed hypersensitivity reactions by affecting the T lymphocytes, and then they have the anti-proliferative effects. The steroids also have anti-proliferative effects by the inhibition of DNA synthesis, and also it inhibits the epidermal cell turnover. And then comes the vasoconstrictive action. They inhibit the action of histamine and also other, this is a wrong typing, it's actually other vasodilatory mediators. So basically the primary effects are anti-inflammatory, immunosuppressive, anti-proliferative, and also vasoconstrictive. This is where it plays a major role in all our acute inflammations. Now, as I already mentioned, glucocorticoids are taken as the prototype here. They inhibit the immune response and also prevent the inflammation. Here we are talking about steroids and inflammation, basically the anti-inflammatory action and not the immunosuppressive action. What happens is they inhibit the immune response and also prevent the inflammation. This inflammation acts by the two mechanisms, that is transcription and also translation. Transcription is the process where DNA is converted to mRNA, and this mRNA is transported to the cytoplasm and also used to build a protein material. the glucocorticoids regulate the transcription factors. That is, they regulate the process wherein the DNA is converted into mRNA. And then the further process goes on into translation wherein the protein is built in the actual cells. But when the steroids are given, it will act at the level of the transcription. That is, it will regulate the transcription factors. What will happen whenever there is an inflammation and we give the glucocorticoids? They bind to the glucocorticoid receptors, and this complex increases or decreases the production of proteins by, as I already mentioned in the previous slide, the transcription is affected. Therefore, the proteins are either decreased or increased depending. It is of enzymes which are involved in the inflammation. It also activates the lipocortins and also slows the activation of phospholipase A2, which is a pro-inflammatory mediators. And it is also involved in further gets converted into prostaglandins and also COX-2. This is that where the when the glucocorticoids bind to the glucocorticoid receptors. Here it is affected action of steroids. Steroids can, as I mentioned, it is taken as glucocorticoid as the prototype here. So what will happen? It will act on the endothelium, wherein the rolling activation addition of neutrophils, that is rapid diseases, normally have anti-effects, that is anti-inflammatory monocyte and macrophages. And then what happens is normally it will stimulate the release of cytokines, chemokines, reactive oxygen species, and also reactive nitrous species during any injury, the anti-inflammatory monocytes and macrophages. But here that is inhibited by steroids. The cross marks are indicating the inhibition. Then the anti-inflammatory macrophages, that is, they are the antigen presenting cells. Their phagocytosis motility is always present. And then their adhesion, apoptosis, oxidative burst is inhibited by the glucocorticoids. It usually stimulates the maturation, survival, migration, motility of dendritic cells. But here that is also inhibited. And also glucocorticoids usually stimulate through the dendritic cells, the antigen presenting cells. It stimulates the naive T cells, leading to production of Th1, Th2, stimulation of Th1 and all, leading to the production of inflammatory mediators, and all these are inhibited by the steroids. So the cross marks indicates the action where the steroid action, the position of the steroid action. That is the site of steroid action, and that is why the anti-inflammatory effect is there when we give it in the anti-inflammatory doses. The question marks Th17 and also TREC, they are all not yet confirmed, but Th1 and Th2 actions are definitely inhibited by the glucocorticoid, and there subsequently the development of interleukin 2, 4, 5 and also interferon alpha gets suppressed. These are the natural actions of glucocorticoids. This was what we saw in the picture, and now what happens, an antigen is presented to antigen presenting cells, that is, as we already saw, the dendritic cells here, the green one. And then what will happen, this will stimulate the T helper cells, and then the Th1 T cell activation takes place into Th1 and also Th2. So here the red arrow mark indicates the place where the action of anti-inflammatory action of steroids is seen, the anti-inflammatory action. This is where the site of action of steroid occurs. Hence, the activation of T helper cells to Th1 and Th2 is not occurring. And also Th1, Th2 further activation and release of cytokines is not happening when we give the steroids. That is where the anti-inflammatory action occurs. And then the cytokines act on B cells and also eosinophils. B cells will release the IgE, which takes up the antigen, stimulates the mast cell, leading to the release of mast cell mediators like histamine, prostaglandin, leukotriene. The red arrow mark there indicates the site of action of steroids. That is why this is very important even when we give in the allergic responses. And then comes the eosinophil. wherein again the eosinophil mediator release is inhibited. Wherever the red arrows are there, the actions are inhibited. Hence, the histamine, leukotriene, all these cationic proteins are not released. Hence, the tissue damage, vasodilatation, edema, all these things which occur during the, as an end product of inflammation, is not occurring when the steroids are given. This is the same thing, which is just a repeat a slide. Then how do this immunosuppression occurs? There are actually, as I already mentioned, through because it acts at the transcription factor, that was the anti-inflammatory effect. But here we are talking about immunosuppression. As I mentioned, this is the second aspect of the steroid. It is not just anti-inflammatory, but also it will cause the immunosuppression. The probable mechanism of actions are, some of them are probable, some of them are known. The repressive effects, that is, it is dependent on the ability of glucocorticoid receptor to inhibit the activity of transcriptional receptors of pro-inflammatory genes. So what will happen is, this the pro-inflammatory genes, the regulators act on the pro-inflammatory genes naturally. The anti-inflammatory mediators are increased, and also it will cause a increase in the immunosuppression. This process is called as the transrepression. Then comes the glucocorticoid induced leucine zipper protein, GILZ, interacts with and also inhibits the action of natural killer cells, and AP1 and annexin A1, a calcium dependent phospholipid binding proteins. What happens is, whenever, but this GILZ mechanism is still under study. It is not actually proved, but it is still under study. The anti-inflammatory action of glucocorticoid induced genes also includes interleukin 10, which is a potent immunomodulatory and also anti-inflammatory cytokine. This is implicated in the negative regulation of the HPA axis once the infection is resolving. Hence, there will be more suppression leading to immunosuppression. The natural thing which occurs during the anti-inflammatory action goes on into the negative regulation and also leads to immunosuppression. Now let us study about the steroid effects on immune cell functions. So the glucocorticoid receptor function in T cells is mainly in the thymus. What happens is, during development, the immature thymocytes, they progress from double negative to double positive. So there was a clarification which was asked, and I'll be explaining it from the clarification slide, which is not here but is with me here. So what happens is, this CD4 plus and CD8 plus, which are the double positive thymocyte, they are very, very sensitive to glucocorticoid mediated cell death and the physiologic concentration achieved during the stress response. So what happens is, here we have just mentioned that the thymocytes, they interact with it, but the actual explanation I'll be telling now. What happens is, this double positive, that is double positive thymocytes, CD4 and CD8 cell thymocytes, are very, very sensitive to glucocorticoid mediated cell death. And then the physiologic concentration achieved during stress response can cause their apoptosis. So they are actually more and more sensitive to glucocorticoid action. Hence, they can cause the cell death. And resting peripheral T cells are comparatively resistant to glucocorticoid-induced cell death. This can cause apoptosis in the immunosuppression. And this resting T cells, the resting peripheral T cells are a little resistant. This difference could be, what they say is, because of expression of a BCL2 gene, which is present in the negative CD4 and also CD8 negative and peripheral T cells. So what this BCL2 gene, what is it supposed to do is, it is a classic inhibitor of cell death along with BCL-XL, which is then highly expressed in thymocyte progenitors of negative cells. Hence, negative cells are those which interact with the self-antigen. Because this is an inhibitor of cell death, And then what happens is, because this is expressed more in the negative CD4 and CD8 cells, they render them more susceptible to glucoside mediated apoptosis, glucocorticoid mediated apoptosis. This is what is mentioned as negative selection. The difference between positive and negative selection is the BCL2 gene. Since CD4 plus and CD8 plus thymocytes are deficient in BCL2 gene, they are sensitive to glucocorticoid induced apoptosis. This double sensitive positive cells, the double cells, the last line in this slide, they are highly sensitive because they are deficient in the BCL2 gene. So this BCL2 gene is supposed to be the classic inhibitor of cell death along with BCL-XL gene. So what happens is, because of this, they are all highly sensitive to glucocorticoid induced apoptosis, the CD4 and also CD8 T cells. So mainly in the thymus, the primary action goes on, and how this goes on is in the next one. The T cell glucocorticoid receptor is required to survive the lethal activation of T cells. So when the glucose binds with its receptor and acts on the T cell, this receptor is required to survive the activation of T cells, because normal activation is anti-inflammatory effect, but then we are talking about the immunosuppressive effects. And this receptor is required in the T cells for the immunosuppressive effects of glucocorticoid therapy, the same as above. So glucocorticoid therapy, what it does is, it induces the apoptosis, that is cell death of T cells in the lymphoid organ, and hence they reduce the migration of T cells to the site of inflammation. So what happens is, because of the reduced number of T cells, the inflammation is not under control, and then the immunosuppression, the anti-inflammatory, it goes into the negative regulation, and hence the inflammation increases. Then the glucocorticoid receptor density is also said to be the critical determinant of sensitivity, because glucocorticoid therapy, which induces the apoptosis of T cells and reduces this, if the receptors are lesser, then this definitely the apoptosis is much lesser. But if the density is more, then definitely there is a increased apoptosis of T cells and also increased inflammation and the primary inflammatory. Glucocorticoid receptor functions in the myeloid cells. So these are again required for glucocorticoid suppression of contact allergy, that is T cell dependent hypersensitivity response. And it is shown that glucocorticoid reduce the circulating B cell numbers. So either it results from the cell type or the stimulus type dependent, because what happens is, the glucocorticoids, since they reduce the number of B cells, the antibody production is reduced, and also the IgE is reduced, and again there is a counteractive response leading to the immunosuppression. So this is leukocyte differentiation programs. These are the ways how the actual glucocorticoids the leukocytes are acted upon by the steroids. So glucocorticoid, which is the prototype here, alters the immune cell differentiation. The first 2 points are the normal functions of the dendritic cells. That is, dendritic cells are the key antigen. So normally during any inflammation, immature dendritic cells are activated, and these activated dendritic cells, they migrate to the draining lymph nodes and interact with the naive T cells and instruct the adaptive immune response system. So what happens is, whenever there is a antigen, this is all presented to the dendritic cells. Because of this, the immature cells get activated, migrate to lymph nodes, and from the lymph nodes, they act upon the naive T cells. And already, as I mentioned in this previous slide, this is where the function occurs. The green cell is the dendritic cells, and then it stimulates the T naive cells, and further goes on activating the production of the inflammatory mediators. So what happens in this case? This is the normal function. Here, during when we give the third point on, the fourth point on is the action of the steroid. That is the leukocyte differentiation, kind of that gets reprogrammed whenever there is long-term steroid ingestion. What happens is the maturation and function of dendritic cells is suppressed. So what happens? It reprograms them to the tolerogenic dendritic cells, and then there is hyporesponsive T cells, and also induced of, and they in turn it causes the reduced inflammatory mediators, and this differentiation is through the Gill's mechanism, which is, as I mentioned earlier, unclear. So basically the function, the maturation and function of dendritic cell is suppressed, which will further, if we take it in a straight way, which will further, suppress the it will suppress the named cell activation, and also the adaptive immune response is suppressed. That is what we are trying to say here. But the mechanism through Gill's, that is the glycine induced leukocyte zipper gene, the mechanism is still unclear about it. And again, this was the previous was the dendritic cell. Here we are talking about the macrophage differentiation. This Gill's is again believed to play a role in the macrophage differentiation. The monocytes within the blood vessels are converted into highly phagocytic macrophages, and what happens is it down-regulates the adhesion-related proteins. So whenever the patient is on a long-term glucocorticoid therapy, what will happen is the adhesion-related proteins are down-regulated, and what happens is, because of this problem, there is high migratory capacity, and then this will favor the increased insulin faster in the patients on long-term glucocorticoid. They are not sticking on to the side, and also the rolling action is all more, and hence there is increased movement of cells to the decreased movement of cells to the inflammatory cells, and as a result of this, faster progression of the tumors. This is again these are dependent on the studies, and further clarifications are all required. Of mouse models, the mice models, they were also shown to be associated with increased macrophages in the spleen, but these are all just studies, and further clarification is required. Basically, it acts on the dendritic cells, which are antigen presenting cells. It will act on macrophage differentiation, wherein the monocytes are, monocyte to macrophage conversion occurs, but then the migratory capacity is increased because of the continuous and long-term ingestion of steroids. So basically, to summarize the whole effect of steroids, there is suppression of T cells, because as I mentioned, it is the dendritic cells which further suppress the activation of the named T cells, and then the steroids, point number 2, steroids interfere with the production of cytokines, which is critical in proliferation and interaction of the T cells. We have already talked about it because of the named T cell inactivation. Then B cells, when it acts on the B cells, it interferes with the binding of interleukins to B cells, and production of antibodies are impaired. So basically, there is cellular immunity is suppressed, as well as the antibody mediated immunity is suppressed. And then when it acts on neutrophils, they inhibit the addiction, chemotaxis, phagocytosis, and release of toxic substances. So what happens? All these symptoms are not occurring, and then there is counteractive response in the inflammatory area, and also there is a further increase in the inflammation. And then suppression of macrophages, as we studied in the previous slide. So there is less phagocytosis, and also there is the reduced production of pro-inflammatory arachidonic acid metabolites occur, because they inhibit the COX-2 and also phospholipase A2. So whenever there is a decrease in the pro-inflammatory mediators, naturally with all this impediment of movement of macrophages, then suppression of T cells, the entire activity is suppressed. Hence, there is increased infection, which is attributed to the immunosuppression action of the steroids. So this is the summing up of the entire thing here. As we already mentioned, the innate immunity as well as the adaptive immunity, and also the time of the infection, where all it can occur, where all it can cause the effect, where all it can affect the immune function is, it can occur anywhere. It can occur either at the innate immunity level, more so on the adaptive immunity level, because innate is very quick response. Adaptive immunity, it can it can cause either the lesser production of antibodies or the lesser it can cause the as it is mentioned, it can affect every facet of immune function, less inhibition of humoral arm than the cell mediated arm basically, but it can definitely affect both the B lymphocytes as well as the T lymphocytes, and also they induce apoptosis in rapidly dividing leukocytes, which was discussed earlier. Hence all of these cause the these lead to powerful immunosuppressants suppression and leading to secondary immunodeficiency. It will be more like counter. This is which we have spoken. The hollow arm indicates the stimulation by glucocorticoids, and that gets the glucocorticoids. So what happens is the macrophages, the macrophages are converted into the immature dendritic cells, and then they go on and become the antigen. They take up the antigen and also cause the phagocyte. On to the left hand side, whereas that is glucocorticoid treated immature dendritic cells take up the phagocytosis and also antigen uptake and become the APCs. Then where it is inhibited, the immature dendritic cells, the conversion to mature dendritic cells is also inhibited, and this will lead to a host of cascading effects. That is one of them. The main important thing again here we can see it is the suppression of the activation of T cells. This is what we are coming back to again and again, because the dendritic cells are, the immature dendritic cells are not converted into mature dendritic cells. What happens is the further cascading effects of the steroids is shown. Activation of T cells do not occur, and then the cellular immunity is affected, because the Th1 cells are not going to produce the interleukin-2 and also interferon gamma, and then it acts also on Th2 cells, but at a lesser extent. So, and even the mast cell activation is affected, and by and large what happens is all the inflammatory cell activities are suppressed, leading to immunosuppression. This is another slide which is showing the same thing. This could be a little confusing, but yes, the dendritic cells take up this, the glucocorticoids stimulate the dendritic cells, and then they act on the T helper cells, normally act on the T helper cells, and then leading to production of interleukin-2 and glucocorticoid action, leading to increased apoptosis of T helper cells. The same way here, because T suppressor cells is not activated, and then there is reduced TNF alpha, and then increased apoptosis of the T suppressor cells. And then again here it also acts on the B cell, and then the antigen, because of the reduced activity of on the B cells, the antigen production is reduced, and also by and large there is an increased dendritic cells themselves. And from these dendritic cells acting on T helper cells, T suppressor cells and B cells, glucocorticoid directly acts on the T helper cells, and they cause the suppression of T helper cells, and also the further reduced production of inflammatory mediators, which is given down. Both T helper, T cellular, the suppressor T cells, both are inhibited directly by the glucocorticoids other than through the dendritic cells. It also acts on macrophage, that is monocyte converted into macrophage. We have discussed everything before. So again, the action of macrophages on T suppressor cells is reduced, hence increased apoptosis everywhere. And then the natural killer cells, which is the innate immunity. Here, this act directly on natural killer cells, and this reduced interferon and all of this leads to reduced cytotoxicity. So glucocorticoids act directly on all the B cells, T cells, everything. Natural killer cells, apart from the action of dendritic cells, which are suppression of all the above cells. Okay, so these are the other mechanisms. Normally, how steroids are released from adrenals in a highly pulsatile and ultradian manner. And whenever it is continuously given, it gets disrupted. Then 11-beta-HSD1 amplifies the glucocorticoid action within the cells. So wherever there is a deficiency, this also reduces the tolerogenic dendritic cells and leading to reduced glucocorticoid action within the immature cells. And then what happens is, after the activation of CD4 plus cells, as we already discussed, there is an increase in the level of 11-beta-HSD1 in the lymphoid cells. And this 11-beta-HSD1 increase is associated with thymocyte apoptosis. So basically, it everywhere they go and also increase the apoptosis of all the cell types. And studies are still underway in this regard. This is the same thing. There are infections which are dependent on dose and duration of the steroid therapy. Most common infections are pyogenic bacterial infections. Chronic use will cause increased risk of intracellular infections, and opportunistic infections are very much common in the children. And in the children, other side effects are more, which will be discussed now. The common opportunistic infections: the pneumocystic jirovecii, the herpes zoster, toxoplasmosis, strongyloidosis, skin infections, invasive fungal infections, HIV, CMV, tinea versicolor, rhinocerebral zygomycosis, verrucae. All these things are opportunistic infections. So how do we prevent this? Just a short word on this because we need to go forward. So influenza, annual vaccination in those with rheumatic diseases, because patients with rheumatic disease more than 50 years, pneumococcal pneumonia, without any prior vaccination, 1 dose of PCV13 has to be given, followed after 8 weeks by PCV3, and this after 5 years after the first dose. And then pneumocystic is treatment with trimethoprim and also sulfamethoxazole. And tuberculosis, remember, wherever there is a long-term use of steroid, screening for latent tuberculosis using either a interferon IGRA or the TS3, the tuberculin skin test, is a complete thing, because you never know when it gets reactivated. So screening for latent TB is a rule here, and also treat for latent TB if the person is positive. So what are the strategies for prevention of steroid effects? There are certain conditions wherein they need for a period of time, but how do we prevent the side effects? One is lowest effective dose for a minimum period of time, which is the ideal one. And then once daily, morning or intermittent alternate day dosing is preferred. And any premorbid condition is to be treated prior to steroids. And steroid sparing agents should be considered when we are thinking about long-term steroid use. So these are these things, that is, treat premorbid conditions and then give the lowest effective dose for a minimum period of time, single daily dosing or alternate daily dosing, the same thing what we have talked about, and then use glucocorticoid sparing agents whenever it is possible, like omalizumab in the severe asthma or cyclophosphamide in vasculitis and all. And these are the other carry a steroid treatment card and all, and not to discontinue the therapy abruptly unless advised by the physician. And also lifestyle modifications are required, because they are, as I mentioned, a double-edged sword. They have to maintain a healthy balanced diet, including adequate calcium intake. There should be regular physical activity, and in the adults there should be a cessation of smoking and also reduction in the alcohol consumption. And steroid tapering regimen, I think this will be too elaborate. This is how we reduce, because depending on each of the conditions, we have to reduce the steroid dosage, tapering. The side effect of steroids, growth suppression will be there when the child is given steroid early in life. Delay in the growth and puberty. Mean height after 18 years is found to be significantly lower. So the what is the management of this? The only way to prevent is alternate day dosing. And with regards to adrenal suppression, there is no robust evidence in the children. So it is to be considered in all children because there is not much of evidence with respect to this adrenal suppression in children. A general rule is it is to be considered whenever for more than 2 weeks the glucocorticoid is given in more than 8 to 12 mg per meter square per day. The management chart for each of them are given here. The signs and symptoms of this is adrenal suppression and also adrenal crisis. Adrenal suppression will be like weakness, fatigue, malaise, myalgia, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, headache, fever, anorexia, weight loss, psychiatric symptoms, arthralgia, poor linear growth, and also poor weight gain in children. Adrenal crisis will be when it goes to a certain level, and then there is hypotension, decreased consciousness, lethargy, unexplained hypoglycemia, hyponatremia, seizures, and also coma. And then screening recommendation is given. Screening recommendation is given in the children. This is not much of, I mean, this is not, the studies are not very good with respect to screening. And then comes the management of adrenal suppression. The stress steroids are given during the periods of physiological stress. With that we already know because it needs more of the dosages. Stress periods like adrenal crisis or critical illness or any surgery, illness or fever, and then fever more than 100.4 and also vomiting and also unable to tolerate oral feeds. And then these things have to be considered because we all know that during stress, the requirement of steroids will increase in these children. And then one of the side effects is hyperglycemia and diabetes in children post-transplant or post-nephrotic syndrome and post-treatment of ALL. It is known that there is a steroid-induced diabetes mellitus. And through the effects of multidisciplinary team with the lifestyle modifications, the starting of insulin can be delayed. But if glycemic targets are not addressed, then the pediatric endocrinologist has to be pulled in, and also the insulin needs to be started on for the children. Then again, side effects continued like Cushing syndrome, which causes growth deceleration and also truncal obesity, skin changes, and also hypertension. There is osteoporosis, risk of osteoporosis, reduced bone density leading to increased risk of vertebral fractures, and most cases are asymptomatic. Less commonly seen in children, but definitely seen. So these are all the management of steroid-induced osteoporosis because a child started early might, still develop it. The same thing, the lowest effective doses for the shortest period, minimal period of time, proper nutrition, maintenance of healthy weight, promotion of weight-bearing exercises, vitamin D supplement, and also calcium supplement. And in the adults, biphosphonate therapy has shown to increase the bone marrow density and also relieves the back pain from the previously fractured vertebral bodies. So basically, when the child is on steroid, we have to maintain the following: physical examination findings like baseline, weight, height, BMI, blood pressure, subsequently the bone health, the baseline spine, bone marrow density, and lateral spine X-ray in children getting steroids for more than 3 months in order to catch the osteoporosis in the early phase. Repeat yearly if the risk factors persist. And then back pain or leg fractures or Cushingoid features, and also there could be growth deceleration. Hence, this, the bone health has to be appropriately checked and monitor the growth every 6 months and also plot on the growth curve. And then for the hyperglycemia and diabetes, fasting plasma glucose annually and also OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test, if the child is obese and also has other risk factors, and an annual ophthalmology examination has to be continued. Investigations in this regard are the complete blood count, glucose, fasting blood sugar, HbA1c, and 24 hours OGTT, and then the lipids and also bone marrow density. All these, have to be monitored in the children on long-term steroids. So this is the where the immunodeficiency or immunosuppression due to steroids end. And now I'll be talking about immunodeficiency due to diabetes. We all know that patients with diabetes have an increased incidence of infections than in the non-diabetic patients. We have always seen cases wherein the diabetic patients have the wound healing is lower, then the risk of infection is higher, they go in complicated courses, and then diabetic ketoacidosis is also precipitated in up to 75% of the cases by the whenever the patient has uncontrolled blood sugars. Here we'll be studying under three main headings: how the diabetes affects the humoral immunity, cellular immunity, as well as the adherence. This is a broad chart indicating all the actions of increased glucose or hyperglycemia. There is reduced secretion of inflammatory cytokines and also polymorphonuclear leukocyte dysfunction. In the first arm, you can see that there is reduced complement C4 active C4 factors also. Then reduced neutrophil B cell function, capillary thickening leading to impaired inflammation. And also there is a mechanism which causes increased virulence of infections and microorganisms, and also it acts on lipopolysaccharides leading to reduced IL-6 and IL-1 from the macrophages, and then reduced neutrophil mobility leading to reduced reduced phagocytic activity, then G6PD inhibition leading to reduced antimicrobial function. So increased apoptosis of the cells, leukocytes, and also through and also reduced transmigration of the neutrophils through the endothelium, where the function itself is affected. And also there is also increased adherence of microorganisms to the cells, and also impaired proliferation and antigen response of CD4 T lymphocytes, and also impaired antibody function, which is query, because these are most known, but here is on the cell function. Basically, it affects the cellular immunity. Coming to humoral immunity, about 80% with diabetes are found to have lower serum C4 levels, and isolated C4 deficiency, primary deficiency of C4 is not a risk factor in the non-diabetic. There is an isolated C4 deficiency and the person is non-diabetic, then they definitely about 75 to 80% of the people with diabetes have documented lower serum levels, leading to increased inflammation. Then cytokines. In diabetics, studies have shown that monocytes secrete increased levels of tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6 when the glucose concentrations were increased, and also advanced glycation end products, that is the AGEs. Pathophysiology, the increased production of AGEs, advanced products of like glucose, lysine, arginine residues, all these, when they occur in an increased manner in a poorly controlled diabetic patient, increased binding of these to the non-diabetic cells. What happens is wherever there are non-diabetic cells, these advanced glycation end products get advanced glycation end products get adhered to the non-diabetic cells, leading to basal cytokine production increase, and also there is an increased risk of infection. So the main thing is what happens is because of the increased end products, there is an increased risk of the inflammation. Then hyperglycemic environment is also known to increase the virulence of certain microorganisms. For example, one of them is Candida, which has a surface protein that is homologous with the receptor for the C3b, that is the complement factor. So what happens in a normal cell is, now in a normal cells, the phagocytic cells recognize C3b bound antigen, leading to opsonization and phagocytosis of the antigen. But in case of hyperglycemia, the receptor on Candida, it increases the competitive binding and inhibition of complement mediated phagocytosis. This is how it indicates a virulence of certain microorganisms, and glycosuria is also shown to increase the growth of certain bacterial strains. The other serum factors are, as we already mentioned, the advanced glycation end products increase the adherence of polymorphonuclear neutrophils, reduce the diabetes and also exudate formation. Whenever there is a reduced emigration, there is definitely the movement to the inflammatory site is reduced, and hence the exudate formation increases and the inflammation doesn't come under control. And also there is as we already mentioned earlier, as low C4 levels, there is also low plasma zinc levels, which increase the risk of infections. So to sum up again here, chemotaxis, the polymorphonuclear leukocytes, there is reduced chemotaxis, reduced phagocytosis, and then increased glucose inhibits the G6PD, which blocks the antimicrobial activity. And because of the increased apoptosis of polymorphonuclear cells, there is reduced PMN migration and also increased exudative formation, and it prevents the regeneration of the cells. This mechanism is because of the increased susceptibility of these cells to the oxidative stress. So whenever the cells are the apoptosis occurs because of oxidative stress, the regeneration of the cells is affected, and hence the whole action of the function of the cells is reduced. Then it reduces the level of phagocytosis in diabetic patients, and there is found to be a inverse relation between HbA1c and phagocytosis. Wherever HbA1c is as and when the HbA1c goes on increasing, the phagocytosis goes on decreasing. Hence, as with reference to the factors discussed before, definitely there is reduced migration and also increased apoptosis, leading to increased inflammation at the site wherever the inflammation occurs. And this HbA1c increase is very, very common in the poorly regulated diabetic patients. And then the oxidative burst, we already talked about that. What happens is this oxidative potential, because of the stress there, it reduces the oxidative potentials of the polymorphonuclear cells. When the free radicals are re-released in early phagocytosis, this whole oxidative regeneration itself is inhibited in or reduced in the diabetic patients, hence again increased apoptosis. And then the bactericidal activity of polymorphonuclear cells are found to be lower in the diabetic patients. Then there is impaired chemotaxis and phagocytosis of macrophages and also monocytes. Yes, this is discussed. They secrete the low levels of interleukin 1 and 6, result of intrinsic defect in the cells of diabetes patients. And also there is an increased adherence of microorganisms to the diabetic cells, and this will alter the, this is because of the altered receptor of carbohydrate composition. So wherever there is increased sugar, there is increased adherence of the microorganisms to the diabetic cells. And there is also known to be in severely ill patients, they have seen the reduced level of sialic acid and also galactose. So basically it increases the virulence of certain microorganisms as mentioned with Candida, and also increases the adherence of microorganisms to the diabetic cells. Yes, again, summing up the entire thing that happens in diabetes, how this immunosuppression occurs. There is a reduced T cell lymphocyte response, reduced neutrophil function. In case of neutrophil function, there is reduced migration, there is reduced maturation, and also increased exudative formation, disorders of humoral immunity, and also antioxidant system depression. We already mentioned that there is no regeneration, hence the apoptosis increases. And then lower secretion of inflammatory cytokines, glycosuria increases the adherence of bacteria, and also GI dysmotility might be there. And also this hyperglycemia will cause increased virulence of infectious microorganisms, and also increased apoptosis of the polymorphonuclear cells. So the end result will be angiopathy, neuropathy, and also the increased risk of infection. So summary of immune dysfunction in diabetes is, when it comes to innate, the complement function is reduced, and then the cytokines, without stimulation, the cytokine productions are increased, and after stimulation, it is reduced. And with respect to polymorphonuclear lymphocytes, the function is reduced or maintained, and monocyte macrophage functions are reduced. PMNs are usually reduced with respect to both function as well as the maturation. In case of adaptive immune response, it is equivocal. It can be either reduced or majority of the times it is not much affected in diabetes, but T cell lymphocyte functions are definitely reduced. When it comes to adherence, it is increased adherence of microorganisms to the diabetic cells. And these are the common infections in diabetes mellitus. The respiratory infections such as Streptococcus pneumonia, influenza, H1N1, TB, then asymptomatic bacteriuria, fungal cystitis, emphysematous cystitis, and then bacterial pyelonephritis, perinephric abscess, and then GI liver infections like H. pylori, oral esophageal candidiasis, hepatitis C, B, cholecystitis, enterovirus, and then skin and soft tissue infection, food infection, necrotizing gangrene, all these are, and now we are seeing again with respect to COVID, we are also seeing the mucormycosis, which we were, previously mentioning as infection in the diabetes mellitus. And other infections, of course, like human immunodeficiency, viral infection, and also tuberculosis. So what are the preventive strategies that can be adopted to prevent these infections in a diabetic patient? So with respect to the respiratory infections, when we talk about it, there is increased frequency of the respiratory infections, and Streptococcus pneumonia is the most common infection that occurs in an immunosuppressed host. And influenza virus causes 6 times increased hospitalization in diabetics than in the non-diabetics. H1N1 and COVID-19 are definitely risk factors for the complications. And ADA, that is American Diabetic Association, and CDC recommended vaccination is as follows. So a child has to be given the pneumococcal vaccine, that is 3 doses between 2 to 6 months, and then after 2 years of age, if they have not given, then the pneumococcal 23 valent vaccine, and then between 7 to 11 months it is 2 doses at the 0 to 2 months interval, and then booster at 12 to 15 months of age, and then if the regimen is started after 1 year, it is 2 doses at the there is no booster dose. The primary dose followed after 8 weeks by the second dose, and after 2 years in the diabetics, 2 doses are recommended, and there are no booster doses if the regimen is started after the age of 2 years. Then comes the influenza vaccine. We already know the same thing as in the non-diabetics. 6 to 35 months of age, 0.25 ml, 2 doses, 4 weeks apart. And then 3 to 8 years, 0.5 ml, 4 weeks apart. And more than 9 years, if it is starting, after 9 years, it is a single dose of 0.5 ml. And also all these influenza doses should be covered annually. The pneumococcal vaccine should be covered, and also influenza vaccine annual dose should be given in the case of diabetics. And tuberculosis patients, they have increased, it is vice versa here. There is an increased risk of contracting TB in patients with diabetes. And in already existing tuberculosis patients, there is an increased risk of multi-resistant tuberculosis, increased risk of treatment failures, deaths, and also because the rifampicin, it increases the metabolism of the oral hypoglycemic drugs. It also complicates the glycemic control. Then this diabetes, because the pathology given is that it impairs the chemotaxis and also phagocytosis antigen presentation in response to mycobacterium, and tuberculosis affects the T cell function and progression to symptomatic disease from the latent phase if it is present. Prevention, routine screening of TB for diabetes and diabetic patients for tuberculosis is recommended either way. So either the TB patients are screened for diabetes, and all diabetic patients should be screened for tuberculosis. Urinary tract infections, we already mentioned, because there is impaired glycemic control and diabetic microangiopathy, impaired polymorphonuclear cell functions. There is asymptomatic bacteriuria, which is increased prevalence. Then bacterial pyelonephritis leading to increased perinephric renal abscess. Fungal cystitis candida is most common. Perinephric access due to E. coli and entry gram-negative bacilli are also very common organism. How do we prevent this? Good glycemic control and periodic checks, and also monitoring of the sugar levels whenever there is fever. We all have to, remember that this any infection, it is again double, kind of double action, because whenever there is an infection, the sugar levels will increase, and whenever there is an increase in the sugar level, because of the factors discussed before, there is an increase in the infection. So periodic checks is definitely essential, and also the child needs to be, as adult, needs to be monitored in case of fever, and glucose levels should be already almost always under control. Then enterovirus is implicated in the development of type 1 diabetes mellitus in the genetically predisposed individual. This could be because of the persistent infection of pancreatic beta cell leading to cell damage and autoimmune response, and then also bystander activation of autoreactive T cells. So this can cause thymus, this can cause loss of regulatory T cells and also lead to this development of diabetes mellitus in a genetically predisposed individual when he gets affected by the enterovirus. And there is an increased risk of hepatitis B and C infection in the patients with diabetes mellitus. There is also increased risk of furunculosis, folliculitis, and subcutaneous abscess. And these may be the first sign of diabetes mellitus in some patients. Whenever we see an increase in the skin infections, it could be the first sign of infections. And then food infections were very, very important chronic complication of diabetes. It could be monomicrobial or polymicrobial. Most common infections are Staph aureus and Staph epidermidis, and around 15% are caused by the Anorubacteria. Food care is very important in diabetic patients, and they have to wear a footwear all the time, and also injuries need to be prevented. And then strict glycemic control and also antibiotic infections need to be followed up, and also the sugar levels need to be always under control. The other common infections are necrotizing fasciitis, Fournier gangrene, head and neck infections, invasive external otitis media, rhinocerebral mucormycosis, periodontitis, gangrenous cholecystitis. These infections increase the metabolic complications such as hypoglycemia, diabetic ketoacidosis, and also coma. Sometimes the patient might present in a diabetic ketoacidosis stage, and then going back, they might find the other infections. Doctors, this is the short insight into the immunosuppression, the reason for immunosuppression, and the cause for immunosuppression due to steroids and diabetes, and also the effects of immunosuppression due to steroids and also the diabetes. My presentation ends here. Thank you all for a patient hearing, and once again, I wish all of you a very happy Doctor's Day.